So it all starts with think Asperger's. Physicians rarely make errors of commission. When they see something abnormal that they know what they're looking for, they rarely err. They often, however, make errors of omission. If they don't know what they're looking for, if they don't know precisely how to screen and diagnose these children and these adults, they'll miss it every time. That's why we encourage physicians to think Asperger's. This project was initiated by the Dion Family Foundation in honor of their son, Dave. I met Dave when he was 34 years old. And he was a boy who was very serious, who desperately wanted to be understood and to be accepted. I've met his parents, Phil and Patty, just committed people, the kind of people who would do whatever it takes to make sure that their son would actually get the best. They initiated this project, and their family has absolutely been intrepid about throwing their energy, their passion, their warmth, and their friendship behind the project that we describe for you today. So it's with great pleasure and a great honor that I can introduce you to the mother of Dave, Patty Dion, a wonderful, beautiful, elegant, compassionate, courageous mother. Sorry for that. Beautiful. Take a look.
For a moment, I didn't know who he was speaking about. Thank you, Ron. Today, I have the bittersweet honor of introducing to you our son, Dave. The second of our 3 children. He was born 6 weeks premature and spent 2 months in intensive care. His doctor told me that he wasn't at all sure Dave was going to make it. But in all his years of practice, he had never seen such strength in a preemie. There was something about Dave from the start. When our son finally came home, we were so elated and relieved. We thought he had endured the biggest struggle of his life. We were wrong. Being a preemie, Dave had neurological and developmental delays. Dave's infancy and toddler years were spent of those playing catch-up. He couldn't sit alone until 9 months. He never crawled, he scooted. And when he did walk, he initially walked on his toes. Yet his speech pattern was normal. From age 3 on, his motor skills were noticeably delayed. Dave had great difficulty throwing and catching a ball. He had an unusual bounce in his gait, and the beat of music eluded him. Somehow, his feet and body didn't work together when he danced. When he was 8, Dave still couldn't ride a bike without training wheels. He had had it. As I looked out the family room window, there was Dave, removing his training wheels and throwing them aside. He got on his bike and proceeded to ride and fall until he was successful. There was something about Dave. During this time, we traveled to Columbia Presbyterian Hospital in New York. He was diagnosed with additional medical problems, but more importantly, with severe learning disabilities. The doctor's prognosis was that our son would not graduate from high school. While my husband and I focused our attention on getting Dave all the medical, developmental, and educational help available to us, none of us realized that a more pervasive problem existed. In elementary school, though nothing physical would set Dave apart other than being smaller in stature, he had few friends. He was the kid alone on the playground. He wasn't included in team sports. He didn't get invited to parties. And in his teens, he revealed that he had been bullied repeatedly. Dave was articulate, but not communicative, especially about his feelings. Yet intuitively, he knew he was different. At 9, Dave went to a leadership camp. Upon his return, he nailed something on his bedroom wall. It was a board broken in half with the word loneliness on it. When I asked Dave what this meant, he told me that the campers were to identify their biggest fear, write it on a board, and break it. At the time, this struck me as odd. Given our extended Italian family, I assured Dave that being alone was not even a remote possibility. I didn't understand that Dave was indeed with us, but separate. He felt alone. This social disconnect became more acute in his teens. Relating to others comes naturally to most people. But to Dave, it was an unrelenting struggle. I didn't realize how chronic this problem was until Dave asked me, "Mom, how do you make a friend?" We arranged for counselors, had him retested, reevaluated, and at one point he told me I was wearing him out. Why didn't Dave fit? More importantly, why did he know he didn't fit? What was there about Dave? To us, he was normal enough. Sure, he had his quirks, talking in a monotone, laughing at the wrong times, constantly losing his keys, and then tying them to his belt with elaborate knotted string, turning sandwich making into an art form. And who could forget Dave cooking on the barbecue, smoke billowing out, his scuba mask and gloves on, fork in one hand and portable fan in another. But who among us doesn't have our idiosyncrasies? Sure, he was frustrating. He seemed to have no sense of time. He was forgetful, stubborn, couldn't see another's point of view. And although willing to help, it would never occur to Dave to offer. But who among us isn't frustrating at times? On the other hand, Dave had an infectious laugh that started from the bottom of his toes and went to the top of his head. He had the ability to literally play with children and ignite their sense of fun. And Dave had the gift of perseverance that kept us in awe. Dave continued seeing therapists of one kind or another, and by the time he had completed high school, he was diagnosed with chronic depression. He was hospitalized, received therapy and counseling, and then renewed his efforts to attain one of his life's goals. Against monumental odds, 4 colleges, and 10 years later, at the age of 29, our son received a bachelor's degree in 2000 from Grand Canyon University. There was something about Dave. Now, thank you. Now, finally, Dave had a diploma and access to a normal life. He was sure that gainful employment was the key to acceptance and would provide a sense of belonging. Dave received job coaching to identify a career path, but each failure was a cruel reminder that he didn't belong. The work environment made little exception for Dave. After all, he looked normal, was educated, articulate. He wasn't in a wheelchair or seemed to need any assistance, so little leeway was given to his set of disabilities. Frantic, we sought out more specialists. and heard the term Asperger's. We turned to Denise and Dr. Melmed of SARRC. Before introducing Dave, I handed Dr. Melmed a list of his strengths and challenges. "You have just described Asperger's," he remarked. Now, at long last, we had the diagnosis. All the pieces came together. Dave indeed did fit. We could begin to understand and truly help. But it was too late. On April 10th, 2005, at the age of 34, our son took his life. Dave did not give up. Dave gave out. He did his best to navigate through a world that he perceived so differently. All he wanted to be was normal. He wanted friends and a future that included a job and possibly a family of his own. He wanted to be part of life, not a spectator. He wanted to contribute. He just didn't know how. Not a day goes by that we do not miss Dave. We will never recover from our loss. With the help of SARRC, our family has sponsored the Think Asperger's program, which includes the screening tool, Dave. Detecting Asperger's very early. We believe, thank you. We believe that early detection will empower those with Asperger's and their families with the knowledge, support, and tools to recapture lives. It is our hope that in hearing Dave's story today, you may share in the life's lessons he has taught our family. That people with Asperger's may be different, but they are not defective. They live in our world, but desperately struggle to be a part of it. That disabilities need not be glaringly obvious. That before judging others, err on the side of compassion. There was indeed something very special about Dave. He taught us to think Asperger's. Thank you.